Thanks for tuning in to the Just Go Play podcast, where we look to develop and promote a positive youth sports experience. As always, we are available for speaking and private engagements and can be reached at info@justgoplay.ca. You can also catch full video versions of our podcast on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to visit us at justgoplay.ca. Enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Just Go Play podcast. I'm your host, Daryl Devnish, also known as Coach D. Today, we have a very interesting podcast. One of my favorite people in the world has joined us. She is a host, also a host of the Just Go Play podcast, but today she's a guest. We're here with Elisa Maruzzo. Hopefully I didn't butcher that.
Close.
I'm also here with my other favorite host. She's going to be the host today, Taryn Lipschitz. So I'm off. Let's get started right away, because you're no stranger to our podcast. You've done so many things in the sports field. You've covered, you're a kinesiologist. You're a mom. You're doing so much stuff in communities, and you've worked with all these sports organizations. Lisa, give us a little bit of background so our audience can understand who you are and where you're coming from right now, and what's going on in your life, and then we'll leave it there, because again, if I went to do an intro of you and read it out, we'd be here for probably an hour. All the stuff you do. So take it away. And well, first of all, is everyone okay? How's everyone doing?
Oh yeah, we're good.
Yeah. T, are you good?
Doing great, Daryl. Loving this weather and people being outdoors and seeing that activity outside. I think it's great to see kind of that shift in mental health and attitude towards what's been going on in the world lately.
100%. I see the shift. I'm starting to see the shift. I think people are starting to see the end, or the light at the end of the tunnel. So thank God. So Elisa, it's yours. Please shed some light on who you are and where you've been, and just so the audience can get a feel for this.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I'm so excited. Thanks for having me on here. It's nice to be in a different seat now. I get to kind of talk about my experiences and be in the hot seat for some of the questions that you guys have, but also hear from you guys as well about where we're going in this world and have that discussion. So to kind of sum it up, yeah, I know it's hard giving an intro whenever anyone asks me for an intro and I'm trying to write it out, and it's like, what should I include? What should I not? And I think a lot of us, we're in that same boat nowadays, where we have so many different opportunities. We have so many different skill sets. We have so many different jobs or things that we've done. How do you encapsulate it all in just a couple sentences of I am a this or I am a that? And I think it's really hard to put a little pin and tie it up really nicely and neatly about what we do. And one of the reasons I think it's hard for all of us is because we're all very much the same. Like, we have that entrepreneurial mindset, we have a skill set of something, but we've diversified, we've gone multifaceted in how we apply those skills that we have. So it's really hard to just say I'm a, insert title here. But to do my best to sum it up. So I grew up in Toronto, which I know is where you guys both are. So love Toronto. And I learned a lot growing up there. I got to play lots of sports. I got to do all kinds of different things in all the different seasons, because there are 4 seasons in Toronto, which is nice. At least there were when I was growing up. Now Christmas is a little brown. But I grew up out there, and I grew up just loving sports. And I had a lot of us had a hard growing up, and you go through all kinds of challenges. And usually it was something to do with sports that kept me figuring out a way to move forward, because in sports, you learn that grit, you learn that determination, you learn how to pick yourself up and keep going. And you have good people around you. You got a good team, you got a good coach, you got the people that can support you when sometimes the people in your life aren't there in the same way. So I learned a lot in sports, and I realized that's all I really wanted to do was I wanted to either play sports, or I wanted to provide an opportunity or provide an environment where other people can play sports, because I saw the value that it had. So I was working, I always like physical jobs. And so I was working construction at the time. And my dad was the one telling me, he's like, just you can't work construction the rest of your life. Like I was working paving and I loved it because it was like a workout all day long. And then I could go to my sports and I'd been, strong all day. So it was great. And I didn't have to go to the gym and lift heavy things because I got paid to do that.
Hey.
But then I found this program out in BC and it was called Sports Science. And I wasn't super academic at the time. I really didn't like sitting still and just kind of putting my head into books that I had to read, not that I wanted to read. So it was a really good program because there was a lot of application with the hands-on side of things. It wasn't just the academic side. It was very practical. So I got started in the sports science program at Douglas College, and it was great because there were small class sizes and the teachers were super knowledgeable. They also had a background, not just in academia, but they understood the academic side, but they had practical real world application because they were coaches or they were teachers or they were business people in the industry. So we got to get that real life experience. So I ended up going from there. I was working as a strength coach as well. I got in a co-op and I continued on there. So I was working as a strength coach. I was also teaching kickboxing because I was in martial arts at the time. So I was teaching kickboxing at a local gym, and I was coaching some minor hockey, just for some little kids. And I ended up transferring to UBC and I decided that one of the things that I saw missing in this field was that business sense. So a lot of us who go into this, we want to be a strength coach or a teacher or something of that discipline. The business side is something that doesn't always get wrapped up into that degree. So I did a kin degree with a minor in business. And I think that really made a big difference because now I can take that kin degree and kind of go anywhere. And I'm sure you guys know with a kin degree, you have to really do something with it. It doesn't do a lot for you unless you do something with it, and you usually have to add to it. So my mom's a physio and she would steer me away from kinesiology because she said, like, it doesn't really get you to the next level of a career of what you want to do with it. And I think that's one of the reasons why myself, as well as a lot of other kins that I know, they're doing different things other than just kinesiology because it just didn't give enough on its own. So you have to add a bunch of things to it, which is where we get such a diverse skill set, is we're always adding to that kin degree. So from there, I took those and I kept working with small businesses, and I'd work as a strength coach with teams, usually with the athletes that were working on either like the development phase. So they were kind of in the high school age and trying to go on somewhere. And I also worked a lot with adults who were trying to stay in shape, trying to get fit, trying to rehab injuries. So that general population a little bit more so. Wow. And I realized that the general population is really where it's at, because that's the heart of it. Like that's, if we can get our community moving, we can get our community to do anything. And so that's kind of where it all started.
See, that's why I didn't make that intro. You have so much range. I couldn't have done that justice. And again, from being a strength coach, a kin student, kickboxing, minor hockey coach, like you've been all over the map. Sports really is your life. And, let me just ask this for you. Why was sports so important to you in terms of, what values? You talked about values. What values did it give you that you live by, that you love? Because obviously you love sports and you love what it did for you, and now you want to give back. So enlighten us on what sport did for you, especially as a woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's perfect. I think, a lot of us have stories about we came from something hard. So something was going on, and at home I was going through, my parents' divorce, and our home life was really unstable at the time. And I was really unhappy. I was typical, I think I was 11 years old. And so, as a girl, especially, you're going through a lot of changes with yourself, and you've got lots of hormones going through, and you need a place to put some of that pain and aggression and fear and understanding. You need somewhere to put it. And I wasn't finding it at home, and I wasn't finding it with my friends necessarily, because, some of them just didn't understand, or they didn't have the healthiest coping mechanisms. So I was really looking for a healthy coping mechanism that I could get some of that, I could work through some of those feelings that I had. And so I'd always played hockey. Hockey was always a safe place growing up. And so I always loved it. And the coaches were there. And you step on the ice and everything else melts away. and anything that happened, it was just out of my head and it was gone. I could play on the ice. And I had coaches who would keep you focused on something outside of what it was you were focused on the rest of the day. And they would drive you and they would push you and they would make you feel like you could do things outside of maybe what you already thought you could do. And so that was always really great. And then I got into a place where I was playing with the boys and I had to start transitioning over to girls hockey because the boys started hitting. And I eventually got into martial arts because I wanted a little bit more of that aggression. I needed to hit some things and learn a little bit what it was like to get knocked down and get back up from a physical sense instead of just an emotional sense. So I ended up finding it was a Kung Fu kickboxing studio. And this guy, he was Irish, an Irish twin, kickboxing, Kung Fu martial artist of, I think he was the third Dan at the time, and had that Irish grit to him, that no nonsense. Like he told me, you can come here, you can sign up. And he gave me a deal because I didn't have a ton of money to put into it. So he gave me a deal on it, but he made me work really hard. And he showed me that I could be better than what I thought I was. And I think that's one of the things that sports really gives you is it gives you an environment opportunity to be better than what you think you ever could be. And if you have a coach who nurtures you and pushes you in a healthy way, that's the best gift anyone can give you. And never mind the skills of the confidence of being able to fight.
That's why you do this, because you want to give that feeling that karate instructor, the Irish dude, gave to you. You want to keep giving that out.
If you feel like you can walk with your head up high, you're still humble, like keep your nose down, keep your head up, and you walk humbly and confidently, and you can do anything. You can accomplish anything, no matter what comes at you. And everybody, especially nowadays, everybody's got all kinds of stuff coming at them. Their confidence is shaken. They might not feel like they have the skills, they have the support network around them. But if you feel confident in yourself that you can keep going round after round after round after round, nice. What's the problem?
Yeah, no, but you can hear it. That's what you wanted. That's why sport was so important to you. Mm-hmm. It gave you that confidence. It helped you become the best version of you. You said all those things. What the Irish kung fu man did, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, and you guys have all those stories. Like you guys have. I mean, I know sports saved your life. We've talked about that.
Yeah. So I feel like you're my lost sister, man. Sports saved your life, saved my life.
And so many people. Yeah. So many people.
It was an escape for you too. Like it sounds like it was an escape for you. And I tell a lot of my friends who have daughters, not just I don't want to be sexist. I tell my friends that have boys too, put them in sports. You're going to learn a lot of life lessons there. Put them in sports. And they do. And they thank me. And they do thank me.
Yeah.
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say,
I know you're itching.
I'm itching. It's so funny because listening to you, Elisa, growing up, everyone has their different stories, but I was in karate and kickboxing. And, when you're a female and you're going through all these life changes and all of a sudden, girls care about how they look and which boys like them. And, it becomes a very different mental game that you're faced with, and you don't really know how to deal with it. And like you have all these emotions, and you don't know yet how to communicate them. So I was like you, I was like, I need to punch something. I need to hit something. I need to channel these unknown emotions and uncharted territory into something. But I love what you said is that you were really fortunate that you had coaches that instilled this belief in you and didn't say, well, you're a girl, you can't do this, or you don't come from a great home, like you're not going to have a future with it. I think that's so amazing and so commendable to those coaches, and I'm sure you still even remember them. Are there any tips that you could give people who are coaching kids right now? Because, we talk about this frequently. Sports gives you skills for life. It gives you confidence. It gives you competence. Helps you learn how to build culture and character. So yeah, if there's coaches listening, what is one thing that you would kind of say to them?
Yeah. Well, I like how you just dropped the 5 C's in there. That's perfect. That's perfect. That's definitely like the one of the things. Exactly. Right, Dee? So the 5 C's is like, just bring it home to that. Like if you can develop the 5 C's in an athlete, like that's number one as a coach. Like you're teaching them the sports skills. Sure. you're teaching them life skills as well too. So don't forget about that. So how do you teach them confidence? How do you teach them culture? How do you teach them competence? Making sure that they're not just learning the skills of the game, but they're also learning the skills of life and their competence in all of that, the connection they have with all of their friends. So to be able to have all those pieces, and then they get to learn how to play a game, which they can play for the rest of their life if they want to. That's a pretty nice thing to be able to offer as a coach. And we don't respect our coaches enough, whether financially or publicly, for the work that they could be doing. Now, let's get real here though. There's a lot of not great coaches out there. And I've had a couple. And those are the ones that I think about when I'm coaching. And I think, I don't want to be like this person. I remember what that person did. And I had some coaches, especially because I was a girl and I was in boys hockey. I was in a male dominated sport. I was in a male dominated industry for work as well, in construction. And I had a lot of people telling me I don't belong there. I shouldn't be here. I'm not strong enough. I'm not big enough. Or making a lot of comments that made me feel really uncomfortable. And I think when you go through sports, you have to learn how to deal with that adversity. And it's actually really poignant right now because we're talking about all that adversity that people are dealing with, whether it comes from culture or gender or race. How do you deal with that adversity? And instead of kind of trying to get away from it, I went towards it and I tried to work with the people who were telling me I didn't belong there and show them I actually do belong here. And I want to stay here because I love whatever the game was or the activity was. And the coaches that were really good, they helped you make you feel like you belong, but they also didn't hold you with kid gloves. Like, you had to work hard to belong. And a girl usually has to work twice as hard, especially in a male dominated field, to feel like they actually belong and get the credit from the people around them. So you learn how to work really hard, and coaches that can inspire that in you of, I don't care what you're coming to the table with, here's the bar, I'm going to help you get there, but you got to put in the work. So I had the coaches, the ones that I think were the best, number one, had a plan. So you didn't just show up and they're kind of doing whatever they feel like because that was the Monday that they woke up and they decide that's what they're going to do. They had a plan. So they had a plan for the season, and they explained it to us in the beginning. They might have had to pivot at some points along the way because, injuries or whatever happened, but they came at us with a plan. They came at it again with the 5 C's, thinking about, I'm teaching these people life skills as well as sports skills. And then the third thing I'd say is not treating people with kid gloves, treating them with respect and kindness, but also with that, that grit and that push. Like I don't think we push our kids hard enough in the right ways. So we need to push them in the right ways harder to be better. And so that's a really big, we have a whole podcast just on that, I think. But I think those are the 3 things I'd say for a coach.
100%. Now, it seems like you've had a lot of good coaches, okay? And because, I bet it'd be hard to pick one. But the qualities that you just talked about, again, I as I hear you talk, and as, T's hearing you talk, we're hearing our own story in there too. Mm-hmm. That if it weren't for some of these coaches, I don't know where I'd be that instilled these values, the 5 C's, and the toughness that you talk about. And that's a fine line right now. How tough do you be on a kid? That coaches, parents have to understand. So I love that you brought that up because that's definitely an issue. For a lot of coaches on what level of toughness that they deal out to their kids or their teammates. Next, I'm going to roll in. I don't want to ramble.
Let's go.
So I'm just following your life now. You went to kin. Why kin? What were you thinking that you were going to get out of kin, kinesiology? And did you think you were just going to be a coach? Why did you go that direction? Kin.
I love machines, and the body is the ultimate machine. And so figuring out how you can fine tune this machine to get it to be the very best it could be is probably the piece that once I'd done sports science, I knew I wanted to do something to do with sports and activity. I didn't really understand kin. And like I said, my mom had tried to get me away from it because, she didn't think it had enough of a trajectory to get me a career.
You didn't listen, of course.
I did not listen. That was a theme growing up.
We like that.
And then, so kin, the coolest thing with kin is you learn how the body works. And I think it's like so many of us with cars, I don't know how a car works 100%. I know the basics, but I don't know how it works with all the nuts and bolts. And then you add in the limbic system and our brain system and our endocrine system, and you add in all these different systems on top of the muscles and the bones and the joints. Man, we're still figuring things out about the body that we didn't know in the past. And it's a really interesting machine. So I wanted to figure out, how can I take this machine and fine tune it so that it can do whatever it wants to do? Because at the end of the day, I wanted people, whether they were athletes or general population, to be able to do what they wanted to do. And this bag of bones you have is your conduit to do that, as well as your mental state.
So, but it sounds like you were heading to be a doctor.
No,
So
I didn't want to fix it.
you just wanted to understand it.
I wanted to understand it so I could tune it and I could push it. Because with kids, you're like, you understand.
So that explains the strength conditioning.
Yeah.
They were your lab rats. Your athletes were like your lab rats in a good way.
In a good way. Well, and everybody's different.
Yeah.
So what works for one person, you got to be a little bit of a counselor or psychologist too, because what works for one person, how you motivate someone, that's the other thing that, we don't add on to, is that kind of, those intrinsic motivational factors of how do I get someone to actually do, even if I know their body can, how do I get them to feel like they can, that confidence piece or the motivation side. And so how do you get them to do that? Being a doctor is, huge respect for doctors, especially right now with what they're doing with COVID. It's not where I wanted to go though. I didn't want to fix something that was broken. I wanted to tune something so it, hopefully wouldn't break and could go where it hasn't gone in the past.
Right. And then that explains the business side, understanding the business side.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do more.
You could be the best professional in the world. If you have no business sense, you can't work in this world. And I saw one of my most heartbreaking things that I saw growing up was one of the coaches I respect the very, very most. He taught me so much about the body, about assessment, which we've talked about how to work and how to tune athletes so that they can achieve what they want to achieve. But he didn't have a strong business side, and I feel like that held him back. And it was such a shame because I knew he had the knowledge and the skills in the industry to go further, but it was the business piece that was missing. And that was always something that I felt like was dragging. And if we shored that up, he could have gone, who knows where.
That might be the missing piece in kin.
I think so.
To incorporate some sort of business knowledge. I know T smiling. She's ready to ask something, but I think I went through kin and I feel the same. I was good at the trade, but I was horrible at selling or setting up a structure or a business. I was like, I know how to train people, but I don't know how to go get clients.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you don't know how to get clients, it doesn't matter how well you train people. You got no clients.
And T brings the communication. Like that's the other missing piece is if you can't market yourself, if you can't market those skills that you have, you can't convey the message to people so that they understand what it is you're offering. It doesn't matter what you're offering. They don't understand. So for T, like that's why, pulling T into the CRP, the communication side of this is something that's missing in a big way, especially in such a convoluted space as the health and fitness, the sport field, where there's so much mixed messaging, so much jargon, so much nonsense that's out there. How do you burst through all that clutter and get to really what you're offering to people of value and communicate that?
Right. T, I know you're
well, I think it's so interesting because it's true. My background is business, then communications, and sports has always just been my passion and part of my life. So I think it's really interesting that we're getting into this because what I was going to ask you is having experience through kinesiology, through training, through being a coach, through working with communities, what do you feel like are the 3 biggest challenges to build those quality sport experiences for kids? And I know you've talked about the business and communication side as a business owner and in that side, but you also talked about the intrinsic motivation for kids because the truth is not every system is going to work the same for every kid. So I think it'd be interesting to hear from you what you've seen over the past couple of years are the biggest issues that we really need to tackle.
This is a big one. This actually, it leads into like kind of why I got out of the one-on-one or the team stuff and why I am where I am now. So that was always my question, like, how do we make this so it's bigger? You know, I can work with one person or one team and get them to achieve, you know, their goal, and that's fantastic. But then you see the environment around us, and it's starting to really erode people's ability or their desire to be active in any context, whether it's sport, recreation, physical activity, general movement, whatever it is. So I realized that it's not necessarily just the individual, it's the environment the individual is in. So our environments are in a lot of ways hindering our ability to be active, to want to be active, whether it's things that are grabbing our attention away from activity. So like the tech industry, for example, that's pulling us to be sedentary, and it's pulling us to be away from activity. So how do we pull people back from that and make it exciting and interesting? And I don't know about you guys, but when I, you know, talk to a 16-year-old, and I'm generalizing here, about where do they want to spend a lot of their time, Call of Duty was a really big winner for a lot of them, especially in the winter when it's raining. So how do we make it so that it's appealing? And I think that a lot of that comes down to value. So I'd say the first thing we have to focus on is value. We don't value physical activity, sport, and movement in a way that we need to. Never mind just for our health and the preventative side of it, but also for our mental well-being and our social connectedness. So we don't have that value around it that we need to really reinforce. And we actually go against that, and we do the shame game where we're always just telling people, you better go out and get fit. You better get that rock hard body. And if you don't, you're nothing. And that doesn't get people jacked up either. I mean, it works for some people, which is fine. You got to figure that out, and it works for them. That's great. But for a lot of people, that doesn't work. And a lot of people also hate sport. So we've got to pump up things outside of sport to get people excited. So we really have to diversify what movement means. Movement is not just sport. It's not just competitive sport. It's not just traditional sports. Movement is all kinds of things. And we need to showcase the value of all of those things. And we need to drop that into an environment that facilitates our ability to play. And at whatever age, whatever stage, whatever ability, we need to have an environment that nurtures that. And we don't have that right now for a variety of reasons. So value and environment. And then that last piece that we've already talked about is communications. How do we message what we're actually giving out there? Because we're dealing with big industry that is messaging things. And then I don't want to get too philosophical here, but we have that conversation about, do we really have free choice? And when you walk by a store and you think, I really go for a pop right now, and you go in there and you buy a bottle of pop, was that your choice to buy that? Or was that some marketing campaigns that make you feel like, maybe that's what I want? Or when you're upset, some comfort food would be good, or sitting on the couch watching a movie. So the communications, the marketing, the messaging that we need to address around what's in the market currently and what's pulling our attention, and what we are trying to say for the movement space that we're in, whether it's sport or physical activity or what have you. That was a big question and kind of a very long drawn out answer. Hope that answered it.
That was great though. I think it's, it's not just about numbers of what's being invested and the amount of teams out there. These are things that anyone could on a daily basis make some changes to build that better environment and think about these things. Mm-hmm. Daryl, you look like you want to say something.
I do. I want to add something, but you guys kind of talk to it. It sounds like fun. It was one of your challenges there too. Like, people didn't make it fun anymore. Like these
work.
What's that? It was work.
It's work.
We turned it into work. So, let's change speeds a little bit. The landscape of sports, because you have this great background, sports background. Talk to me a little bit about the landscape now of sport and how you see it. Good, bad. And it's just a continuation of what I just said. Fun. We made sport into work. So what's your view on the landscape of sport, and why, I'm going to add a little bit, why is sport dying? It's my own opinion, but why you might have it, but why is it dying? And what's the landscape
Yeah,
look like right now?
We're in trouble. We're in trouble, 100%. Like if anyone listening has not listened to the other podcast, please go back and listen to the podcast because we touch on this in a lot of the other ones. Sport is dying. Physical activity is dying. Movement is dying. You don't have to go very far without finding a statistic or a personal story about how sport is dying. And physical activity, movement, physical education, whatever you want to call it, however you want to wrap it up, it's movement, and we're not doing enough of it. And there's reasons why that is. So a lot of it, and this is where like I went from working in the one-on-one side, the team side, to now working on the organizational behavior side and the environment side, and really looking at it from a community perspective. And so we can look at things like social determinants of health, and you're looking at, you know, what are the financial barriers to accessing things like sport? Sport has become so unaffordable for people that they can't even think about being a part of it. So there's one whole big section we have to look at. The sport entrepreneurs that are out there telling you you need to spend 35 grand to give your kids spring hockey, which they don't need anyways. And you're saying that this is now something that we have to have as standard is asinine. Absolutely.
Pay for play. We call it pay for play.
100%. And you're asking parents who can barely afford to pay their rent and their bills and everything to say, now I want you to put out this much money to put your kid in a game that they're going to play for fun, that they may or may not go far, and it doesn't matter if they do or they don't. And you're asking them to do that for what? For what? Nothing. When they could play games and activities that don't cost that amount, and they still get a lot of the great skills that come out of it, probably even better ones. Because we know, and I think T said this on one of our last podcasts too, we know that 7 out of 10 kids in competitive sport will drop out by the time they're 13. And that is criminal. Absolutely criminal. Regardless of that, we don't value it enough. So in the school system, we're cutting physical education, which is baloney. Absolutely. So we're cutting physical education. We're not training people, whether you're a generalist teacher or a PE teacher, to develop movement in a way that really facilitates lifelong wanting to move and the desire to move. Parks and recreation, especially right now, I have some colleagues down in the States who are talking about this. Budgets are getting cut, they're getting squeezed, and recreation is going to go as well because it's looked at kind of as a nice to have, not as a must have. So again, back to that value. So we're cutting the budgets for some of these things. And like I mentioned before, our environment has gone so convenience and sedentary focused. I go to a friend of mine's house the other day. They have one of these little puck things, and they can tell it to do whatever they want. Open my curtains, turn on my lights, go get me a soda. And they have a little robot that goes and gets it. Why can't you get up and do it yourself? We're growing people to now be in a world where they don't have to do for themselves. They don't have to build things themselves. They don't have to go and hunt and gather, which, that's fine. But we need to do some things ourselves. And a lot of it is a physical pursuit. And if you don't care to have a physical pursuit in life, why do you need your body to actually do anything? Never mind the fun piece. So I think there's a whole bunch of reasons why we're not as active as we need to be.
This is another podcast.
Pick one.
This is another podcast, a whole podcast.
Yeah.
And it's
we've touched on this, so it's good because the theme it's been the same. The same message has been coming throughout all the podcasts.
Well, and I think, like, Elisa, as you're saying that, what I keep thinking about too is when I look at society and the next generations, there's an expectation that things will just be delivered to you and given to you, and they'll be fast. And you're missing teaching kids the skills about integrity and hard work and commitment and adversity. And, like a great example is all these food delivering apps. All of a sudden, you don't have to learn how to cook. You don't have to go get anything for yourself. We're losing that providing for yourself and looking after yourself in certain ways. And I just think, some of the life lessons we learn in sports would transfer well if kids were in sports, because they're not going to learn these life lessons anywhere else. Everywhere else they're taught, take your cell phone, use an app, do this quickly, information's right here. So, I think it's so crucial, especially parents, coaches, teachers, anyone listening, that we make some changes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, you said it. And, I don't want to vilify tech. Tech's not the demon in this scenario. Tech is a tool like anything else, just like a hammer. You can use it to build something or you can use it to break something. And it's the way we use tech that is gonna facilitate whether it supports us or it kills us. And it seems like we're using it in a way right now that's so new and it's evolving so fast. We're not even really understanding the repercussions. And we see the repercussions now. We're starting to get some evidence around it. But whether you need the evidence or not, we see the damage that it's having when it just comes to, if you're sitting still for too long, that's bad for your body. And it's bad for your mind. So what can we do? So, we can talk a whole podcast about all the bad things that are happening. At the end of the day, we know people aren't moving enough.
Sitting is the new smoking. Isn't that what they say?
100%, yeah. And people think if you go to the gym say you go to the gym and you do something for an hour a day, but you've sat for 8 hours a day, it doesn't erase the 8 hours of sitting. Like it doesn't take it away. It's marginally better, but you're starting from down here. So it really doesn't get you where you need to be. So people need to rethink, but we also need to stop the shame around, you have to be either high level, like you only valuing sports at a high level. We need to get rid of that. Only valuing traditional sports. So we need to really enhance things like non-traditional sports, recreational activities, outdoor pursuits, getting back into nature. We need to value those things in the same way as we do high level sports and in a healthy way.
So just so our audience knows, high level, low level, what are you talking, like basketball and like ultimate frisbee, or like, is that what?
Yeah. I mean, if I had somebody who played ultimate frisbee right here right now, they'd probably hit me and say it's a high level sport, because they do have, like, ultimate frisbee has international competition, 100%. But you can also grab a disc and go and play in your backyard and with your friends, and that's a game. Like it
Right.
can be both, which they can all be both. But I think we value the trophies, we value the W's, we value the teams that have the leather jackets and they get to walk around, and part of that is culture. So part of that I understand. Like I liked when I first got my uniform for one of my hockey teams after I'd made a higher level, man, you feel proud of yourself. You feel like you belong in this exclusive club, and you worked really hard to get there.
Status. That's status.
Yeah. So like you want that. You have that. You earned that. But we need to value things outside of that. So when I moved to BC, there's a whole culture that's just outdoors. And outdoors, there's no cameras. There's nobody out there taking pictures of you, showing off, you're doing this, you hike this mountain, you rock climb that face. Nobody cares. But you care, so you do that for you. And so whatever it's high level, low level, recreational, competitive, if you're doing something, an activity or sport that makes you feel good, that's what matters. Not what everybody else thinks, not what somebody on social media thinks. What makes you feel good?
And Elisa, I think it's so interesting because you are in BC and it is more conducive to being outside more of the year. I mean, also any place you could be, it's just, BC's beautiful. You have a young one, you're having a second. As a mother, what is it that you now want for your kids in their experiences, and knowing too, when they grow up, when they're 10 to 18, technology will have evolved so much more in that time as well. So, now you're in that perspective of mom.
Mm-hmm.
What is that like?
That's very different. It's very, very different. I'd always talk to parents about their kids, and you talk to them from afar without really having that lived experience. And now I have a little bit of that lived experience. Like you said, like they're young, and you see the world so differently. And you see the world in a way where it's like, it's my job now, number one, to provide the best opportunity for this little person, for little people. Now, if I look at the environment that they're going into, I am terrified. And I'm sure every generation has thought that in the past. They think that the kids coming up, the generation before them, they had a great time, and now this generation, they don't work as hard and they're not going to be as good, and they're coming into a world that isn't, maybe it's a world war that was going on. I am terrified of where these kids are going, but I'm also inspired because there's a lot of really powerful kids that are coming up, especially girls and women. I think for girls, it's a very, very different place. It's not perfect, not by any stretch. It's a very, very different place now than it was. They still have to work, I believe, twice as hard if they want to be in certain spaces. And that's okay. I think that's good, because it teaches them that you can be twice as better as you thought.
So
But now,
has that affected you in terms of where you are in the field? Do you think being a woman has affected, the level you've reached?
100%. Well, and one of the things that I've always struggled with, especially now, like being a mom, is when I was pregnant, I know a lot of women are afraid to get pregnant because it'll slow their careers down, or it'll change the trajectory of their careers. And so they put off having a family because they want to get that promotion. And I get it, because I've been on both sides of the hiring table, and I've heard the conversations from the men and from women as well, because they're interested in the business, and they say, this person is going to have children, they're not going to be reliable, we shouldn't put them in that position. And those conversations exist. 100%. I've heard that. And I've also thought it. I have, because if your job is to focus on the business and to do the best thing for your business, you want an employee who's reliable, who will be there. But we have to expand our thinking and not just think about the business, think about people. And people are filled with all kinds of things. And when you hire a woman, you have to make sure that you allow an opportunity for her to have children, because we're the only ones who can do it. And when you hire men, you have to give them the same opportunities to raise their children, because they also are in that place of, you're not taking time off, your wife can handle that. She's going back to work, or she's going to take care of the kids, and you're coming back to work. And the men are saying, I want to help raise my kids. And so I'm getting way off topic here, but it is challenging when you have kids to find that career step. But now looking forward at what kind of environment do you want to have for your kids? At the end of the day, we just need to be better. We need to be better when it comes to sport. We need to be better when it comes to physical activity. We need to be better when it comes to nutrition. And if we can be better, then that's a win. Because life is hard. So let's just focus on being better.
And I love what you said. I think you've said this a couple times throughout our chat, not shaming people. I think there's like these expectations of, to be the perfect woman, you need to be married with a kid and a career and this, and your body needs to look like this, and you need to be baking fresh bread every day. And that's not it. I think the most important thing is that you're focusing on the health, mental, emotional, physical health of you and your family, and taking time for yourself as well. And, keeping in check, and, you don't need that perfect body. Whatever you feel confident in and comfortable and can move in the way you want, that's amazing. And, I think as a society, there is no perfect image. It's you build it the way you want it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done there.
A lot of pressure, I think, on women.
A lot of pressure. I think there's a lot of pressure on different, not just women, there's other groups that have a lot of pressure too. But I love what you said, is just, we need to make sure the environment is changing. It's filled with diversity and inclusion, and making sure people are having fun.
The culture is changing. Yes, I agree.
Well, and you said, just to touch on what you said, T, I agree. We can't shame people. Like, that's not the way that we're going to get things accomplished. We do need to hold people accountable, however. So we need to hold people accountable in a supportive, positive way. And that was what one of my old coaches did for me. Was he wouldn't shame you, but it's like when your parents, sometimes they would say things to you and you knew that they were disappointed. They wouldn't outright say certain things to make you feel really bad about yourself, but you could tell, like, shit, like, I really screwed up. Like, I got to be better. And they would say that in a way that didn't make you feel like you were a bad person. You just did a bad thing. So we need to hold people accountable to be better, to be more active, to be healthier with themselves, to be kinder to each other, especially nowadays, without that shame piece, because that just makes people go sit in a corner and not feel like they want to see the world.
I love that. I think accountability is huge. And I want to hear from you, what's one thing that you are committing to be accountable for over the next bit, in terms of changing the landscape and making more positive experiences in the physical activity, sport, movement industry?
Well, my priorities have grown a little bit. And so now having these 1.5 little people that I'm managing, My accountability is on what can I do to teach them the skills that I think they need to be able to survive in this world. And this world is hard. There's all kinds of pressures, and pressures are good. You need pressures. You stress, not distress. You need you stress. And so how do we make sure that you're raising little people, whether they're my little people or whether they're someone else's? I'm trying to be accountable to what can I do? And I'm trying to learn as well, because I don't know everything by any stretch. So I'm trying to learn and grab information from everywhere I can to be the best version of myself as a parent as well as a teacher to these little people that I have running around. And that means being a good role model. So I have to stay on top of when I feel tired or when I feel like I'm overwhelmed and I don't want to do something that, maybe I feel like I should do. I still have to find a way to get going because I feel like this little person needs me to be better than I was yesterday.
Being the best mom you can be. I love it. I love it. So, we're coming to the end here. Tell us what you're excited about. You're working on right now. Besides being a mom, and a mom again. What are you excited about? What's exciting you about this community revitalization project? What's exciting?
Oh yeah, this project. So I've worked in the community space for quite a while, and I've worked with the different pillars that we have: the sport pillar, the rec pillar, the physical education pillar, the communications pillar. And I like helping to pull them all together and unite them all, because I see the power of community. And I know that if we start bolstering up those legs of the community, man, the community starts to rise. So I'm really excited about that, because there's been, I think it's Matt that always says this, the plan does not need to be reinvented, it needs to be implemented. So that's what we're trying to do with this project, is really implement those plans. Things are going to be a bit different than how they've been projected in the past. But at the end of the day, when you take evidence as well as experience and you put them together, there's a lot of crossover and stuff that's been done in the past or stuff that we know. It's not new information necessarily. It just needs to be delivered, implemented, evaluated, and held accountable to actually deliver on the goals that it set out. So this project, the people who are attached to this project are all in the same mindset of how do we implement these plans so that it actually works, and then we start to see these communities rise and elevate themselves. And I think the community itself is where we need to address a lot of these issues that we talked about. And so no better place than just get our feet in there and get going.
Wow. That, and we've been talking about, the community revitalization project for a couple episodes now. Sounds like you're kind of like a quarterback, kind of making sure everything's running smooth. And I'm so excited for you guys and what's coming. Let's get into some next steps. What can people leave here right away? Like you said a lot. I learned a lot about, what females are going through today. And some of the challenges you face as a mom, as a professional woman. Leave us with some next steps for our audience.
Yeah. So first, I think there's two facets for how we can address this issue when it comes to movement. One is the individual. So for yourself, find an activity that brings you joy, that you can play, that you have fun doing, whether it's with your kids or your friends or by yourself. Find something that brings you joy and makes you feel good. Doesn't have to be what's popular, doesn't have to be what's on Twitter or whatever, Instagram or whatnot. Find something that brings you joy and try that. Just try it out. You'll love it. And then the other thing is, in the environment that you're in, take a second and look around and say, how can we make this more active? Whether it's active transportation, whether it's getting rid of some of the tech devices that do things for you, like T said, the food apps that bring food to your door. Go out and get it or make it yourself. What can you do to facilitate more activity in your life by just doing a few little things? Maybe getting rid of some of those convenience things and bringing in some activity into your day-to-day. And then a further stretch beyond that is when it comes to those three environments we look at: the sports space, the PE space, or the rec space. If you or your family or your friends are involved in any of those spaces, pick one and look at how can this be better and what can I do? And then the people who are leading those spaces, whether they're coaches or teachers or programmers, ask more of them, because we're working with them on all kinds of things, but they need to hear from the community about what they want. You need to demand better and demand more. And so educate yourself about what you're asking for, and then go to the people who are working in those spaces, work together. Don't just sit there and berate them, but ask more and help. Don't just lay a problem out and walk away. You got to get your hands in there and work. Maybe that means volunteering. Maybe that means taking some training, but be better in those spaces as well.
Wow, those are cool. Very good.
What about you guys? What are your next steps?
T.
Wow, that was great, Elisa. I think it's just been really inspiring for me to hear from you about everything that you've done and where your head's at with things. And I think my next steps that I would give people are, one is believe in yourself. Believe that you can push yourself harder, you can be better, you can make actual change in the world. I think sometimes we're like, well, why would I do that? I'm just one person. Well, one person can make all the difference to a million other people. I think the second thing for me is stand up and ask questions. Don't just assume things should be done away because they've always been done that way. Now is the time to make real change. And I think with everyone going through COVID and being at home and getting this complete mix up in life and shaking things up, it's time to kind of really reevaluate things and say, what's working, what's not working, what's broken, what do we need to fix? And the third I'd say is hold yourself accountable. You know, don't look at an experience and just say, this is someone else's problem. You know, everyone's going to think like that. Nothing will get done. So hold yourself accountable, whether it's having a discussion with someone or asking the questions or even just, you know, making it something that you at the dinner table talk about so that your whole family's involved. Those would be my three things. So Daryl, wrap it up.
Great.
Yeah, I always get left with scraps. You say everything. You say everything. So you know what? I gotta thank Elisa, because you're very inspirational, not just to women, to anyone out there who is, you know, a young athlete, and seeing sport as a vehicle to so many options now in life, and how it's I want to say it's dress rehearsal for life, as Matt would say. We're quoting Matt quite a bit today. I really took mentorship from today. Elisa, sorry, it sounds like those early coaches really had an impact on you. So find yourself good leaders, okay? Whether they're coaches, teachers, parents, you know, find yourself a mentor that is going to help you with those values, you know, becoming the best version of yourself. And you know what? I really like the accountability piece that T was talking about. We got to be accountable. Parents, coaches, organizations, we are accountable for this next generation of quality sport for the youth. We are responsible. Be accountable to these people, these stakeholders, because at the end of the day, if we're not, they're not going to have a quality experience. You know, so those are the things I would, you know, that are left to say, because there's not much. But I loved how this went today. This, you know, the flow was really interesting to see where you came from and where you are now and where you're going. So I got a real good view today of who you are. I already knew who you were, but where you're going, and this community revitalization project, I'm so excited. It's going places. So check it out. If you like this podcast, share it with your friends, share it with anyone who will listen. We need more people to start talking like this in the communities. It can't be just a few. Everyone's got to start talking like this. And back to the thing you guys talked about today, culture. We got to start changing the culture. So on that note, just go play, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. You guys are doing awesome work.
Thanks for being here. You were awesome.